Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. I'm Matt Yakovit, once again joined by Avi Press.
In person this time. Hello.
In person, live from Oakland, California, where we just ate Cambodian food for lunch. So we are back from, I don't even know what the restaurant's name is.
I also don't remember what the restaurant's name was. It'll be in the show notes.
It's on Broadway in Oakland. It was pretty good food, though.
It was quite tasty.
So here we are in Oakland, and we are here to recap some of the news of the week and talk about whatever random things pop into our head.
We're really winging it here. It's going to be good, though.
Really winging it.
I'm sure it's going to be great.
Well, you don't have to say winging it. We don't want to give away our secrets.
Right. Never mind.
Yes, we're totally on the ball today.
Yes.
So we are actually here. We're talking about all kinds of interesting new growth metrics and some of the things we're looking at doing in the open source business space. We're starting to look at conferences we're going to attend next year. We're looking at all kinds of fun stuff. So this is going to be super exciting today.
I think so.
But let's start with some news of the week. So this week we saw that there was a couple of people or a couple of companies that raised some funding.
Yeah, the first one, a really interesting one, T, from the original creator of Homebrew, announced yesterday via TechCrunch that they raised $8.9 million for T, a package manager, to help open source developers get paid. From what I understand, it understands the dependency tree of any given package that is on its registry. If T is able to get any sort of funding for one of those package maintainers, it knows, has information about how that money would be, distributed to that ecosystem from that package. Who are the dependencies? How do we distribute, this funding to those dependencies, and facilitates all of those things. It apparently does this in a Web3 kind of way. So this information about dependencies is on a blockchain. It seems like there is a way to, just kind of provide support to a given package that you might have some stake in. You want it to be kept up to date, supported, et cetera. And so you might, pay that project just kind of in a sponsorship model. But it also has an NFT component. So I guess it maybe makes it possible for package authors to mint NFTs that are then sold to users that are on the platform.
And are they going to pay with coin?
That I'm not sure. We're looking through the white paper right here. I'm not sure if there's. I mean, I imagine that if there is, an NFT component to this, that it probably has its own coin that comes with it.
Because this is an interesting thing with the dependencies. With the dependencies, there are a lot of open source projects who are built on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
Right, and so you take a database at its core, you take a library, you mix and match software from different, sources, and you build something that's unique. So I wonder if this is going to drive questions around, hey, you used, this one package. So I wonder how the donation structure will be worked there. So somebody says, here's $100. Do they say, oh, there's 100 dependencies, everyone gets $1? Or
right,
is it,
that's not very good. Yeah,
that's a really interesting
it's a much more complicated thing than that. Yeah. And, this is not the first project that tries to take this approach of, understanding dependencies and distributing money to dependencies. This is how Tidelift works. I think that there have been kind of a variety of NPM, funding approaches that will scan package JSONs and try to, distribute funds that way. I think, T is definitely interesting in the sense that this stuff is kind of baked into the package manager very natively, which personally I'm a huge fan of as someone who has tried to start a similar kind of project before. But I think the one thing I'm, I think a little bit skeptical of in general is kind of the building too much stuff on top of NFTs, because then you're kind of at the will of speculators. And
whether it's a coin or an NFT, I mean, you're creating value from something that doesn't inherently have value.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not backed by,
something.
So I get that. I mean, but it is an interesting thing because I actually think that The concept of decentralized infrastructure has a massive potential.
Definitely.
I mean, one of the big challenges we have in today's space, and this is not something T specifically designed for, but you think about like the software that we're running, it's so dependent on, single points of failure along the way.
Yep.
I mean, it's not just, like you think about the cloud and it's like, oh, the cloud, it's not a single point of failure. Well, an AZ goes down, multiple AZs go down. There's something that impacts, different things. But you're also relying on SaaS providers and companies that are basically holding your data. And if they ever go under, you lose whatever they had. So is there a way that we can, have more decentralized control over some of these services, some of these things? It's an interesting space that has potential, I think.
Definitely. And I think the languages, the programming languages that have more support for this kind of thing out of the box, like, being able to import packages by URL rather than just assuming you're going to the centralized registry. Like, I think a lot of those things are, fundamentally very good ideas. But, on the flip side, people will say like, oh, well, this is why IPFS is a really good idea and these sorts of things. And unfortunately, like, we haven't really seen the technology, from those efforts really get to a point where we could really rely on it at the kind of scale that we do for, say, downloading a JavaScript package over HTTP from NPM, these kinds of things. But I'm sure we'll see a lot of continued innovation in this space. And so it'll be really interesting to see where the T project and now company goes from here. But in general, getting open source maintainers paid, I'm all about it. And so
me too.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it goes well. I guess on the similar vein of other fundraising announcements, we also had Mergestat that announced their initial funding, a $1.2 million pre-seed. Mergestat's a really cool tool. They try to the goal is making Git and just general data involved with software development queryable, just like SQL, which is pretty cool. Yeah. There's such a wealth of data in Git history and in just the check-ins and the way that open source, that is the fundamental unit of open source contributions, and to be able to query that interactively, I think will lay a really good foundation for a whole host of other tooling and ecosystem that can be built on top of it. So pretty exciting tech, I think.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that's really been happening, and I've seen it accelerate the last couple of weeks. Now, these are good. Fundraising announcements are always good. It's more money into the ecosystem. But we've also started to see the layoffs again.
Yeah. I think we're going to continue to... probably going to continue to see more of it, unfortunately, too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like a lot of predictions now that they're saying after Christmas you're going to see more because CEOs don't want to lay off before Christmas because that's a bummer.
Right.
So, we'll lay off after. Getting laid off, period, is a bummer.
It's a bummer.
Let's be honest. It's just a bummer. So I would not want to do that at all, obviously. So
right. But I think, when you hear the kinds of things that, especially in like the venture world and how this is being talked about, I think the sentiment was very bumpy for a while, and now I think people are fairly certain that 2023 is not going to be a great time to raise money. I think at least the experience that I've been seeing from both myself and other founders that I've talked to was a general sentiment before of how quickly can you spend all the money that you have raised, like how quickly can you grow, how fast, and now it's you have so much runway, that's great, it's going to be really hard out there soon, like conserve cash. And so that's not to say that's actually what's going to happen, but the sentiment of these investors is ultimately what happens. But there is a lot of pent up dry powder capital as well that is just kind of sitting undeployed too.
Yeah, I mean, what did we see? Who had 20 years of runway? Who was that?
Oh yeah, Cal.com on their Cal.com has open metrics about their company, and they say they have 20 years of runway when we looked yesterday.
Yeah, so it's a long runway.
Yeah, very long runway, but that's always, I think those calculations are usually just based on like what you have spent so far, not what you plan to spend. So
it's just so weird that everything has changed so quickly where, even like a year ago, everyone was worried at the beginning of the pandemic where it was like, oh my God, this is going to totally impact, the economy. And, it had an impact on the economy from a tech space. Tech workers just switched to working from home. And then it was like, oh, we can't hire tech workers fast enough. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it was the big crunch, right? And then it was, it's the mass resignation because, there's so many jobs out there and there's so many places to go get money.
Right.
And then you couldn't find good employees, right? And then all of a sudden you flip that around and it goes from you can't find employees to now don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Right.
That's a weird change so quick. But I think it's really because so many companies, their valuations were not in the right stratosphere. And they got a lot of money without a lot of actual business process or even potential, business outcomes.
Yeah. And I think, this wasn't even just tech. I think there was just there was just a lot of money and speculation in the venture world. And a lot of people are saying, oh, this is not really a crash so much as a readjustment to like what should have been normal the whole time. And I guess time will tell if that is correct. But it's, I think it's a fundamentally good thing that we're making bets on, just improving tech in a lot of different areas. And I hope that this doesn't slow down just like overall innovation as well. But one of the great things about open source, I think, is that it will be more, I think, hopefully, it makes logical sense to me that it will be a bit more resilient to these kinds of conditions overall because, your community is not going to go away just because there were some layoffs in the company. And even, projects can be robust to even entire companies just disappearing. The tech and the community can still be there and live on afterwards. And that's kind of one of the reasons why people care about vendor neutrality so much.
But I think there's also a potential, even if the projects live on, that some of these projects just get abandoned.
Definitely.
Because there's a lot of projects out there that might have usage but don't have a lot of contributors. And maybe one or two companies are responsible for those contributions. And so that means that there's these projects out there, they lay off staff. Those people, I don't want to work on that project because that was specific for that company.
Right.
Now I'm not going to work on it. So anybody who was working on it or using it potentially could suffer. And this brings up an interesting article that was written, by Stephen Von Nichols from ZDNet this week, where he was talking about how Twitter turns its back on open source development, right? After all the layoffs, how is this going to impact, what Twitter had already been investing in open source and dedicating to open source? And that's an interesting question, right? Because, the trend has been many companies building open source tools, putting open source tools out in the ecosystem. And when you find these tools that, are interesting, you might adopt them, put them in part of your, build pipelines, put them in part of, your overall, apps. And now all of a sudden the maintainers might decide, hey, I'm not getting paid for this anymore. I'm going away.
I don't know. Like thinking of what to add to that. It's very troubling for sure. But there's one argument.
Am I just the Debbie Downer today? Is that what it is? Like I'm just like, layoffs, everyone. I don't like the money that's been raised. It's all bad.
But if there is a project that is really, really stood up by a single company, and that company goes through trouble, and the project just kind of goes away, was the project really that important to begin with?
There's a fundamental problem, though, that, there's an assumption that people using software or people downloading and, deploying software means that they're actually willing to put in the work to maintain it and fix bugs, especially bugs that aren't necessarily applicable to them.
Right.
And not everyone has the skill set to go in and make the modifications to these projects, even if they have the capability to. Right. And so, part of the reason why a lot of companies will adopt, software that's already out there, open source software, is because someone smarter than them, or they assume smarter than them, built it. And you could still go out there and self-support. You could still go out there and fix it, but you're relying on the kindness and goodness of the community to pick up the pieces after the main maintainers have gone away. And let's be honest, in a lot of projects, there's only a handful of maintainers that are the core maintainers. And even if there are other people who decide to fork it, there's no guarantee they're going to have the time, money, energy, or desire to maintain it, even if it is popular.
Right. It's one of those things where people, I think, do not, give all due credit to the open source projects, which really are stood up by a single company kind of for the good of the rest of that community. Some people would just rather have no companies be involved at all and just kind of keep it completely separated from the open source stuff. But when you see things like this of, the company steps away from open source maintenance, or the company goes away completely to step away from maintenance, and suddenly we realize actually that company was really providing quite a lot of value to everyone, just totally for free for this group of people. And I think overall, I wish that I would see more of that acknowledged in the open source space, that actually a lot of projects are really just stood up by one group of people, one person or one company or this kind of thing. And that's okay. That's okay.
Until it isn't.
Until it isn't. Obviously if you have more stakeholders in something, that is just more resilient than if it's not. But that's not needed to produce a lot of value for other people.
Yeah. So there was another article that I saw this week that was kind of interesting. And this one was specifically how, and I didn't know that this even existed, but for those black hat hackers out there, evidently there are open source tools to help you hack better, including tools that help you do things like ransomware.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting article that I read that some toolkit that they built to encrypt people's data and then sell it back to them accidentally deleted all the data, so they couldn't actually get their money. So it turned out to be something that was ransomware, and then actually just was totally malicious.
Deleteware, yeah.
Deleteware. But it's interesting because a lot of the same issues that we face as community members in the open source space, as users of the open source ecosystem and developers of software, are faced by everyone, including hackers, and in this case, QA type issues. Right? That's something that happens probably more often than we want to admit. Now, it's obvious when you have this kind of tongue-in-cheek example of hackers, who can't build software to actually do what they wanted it to do. But it does bring up an interesting point that now, with a lot of the software that we have out in the ecosystem, we put a lot of trust that software works out of the box as expected.
Those who know better don't, but I assume nothing works. I feel like generally it's wow, it's amazing that this actually works. That's very cool.
Well, and this is an interesting, example though. So we were just talking about this today, right? So we're talking about some analytics software. We're talking about, we ran into a bug, and it's a bug that has been known for 3 years now, 4 years?
Yeah, that was a 4-year-old bug.
A 4-year-old bug. But the project, because so few people actually hit the bug, decided to close it. Well, for us, that's a bug that is actually a showstopper.
Yeah.
Because we can't get around it.
Yeah.
And so there's no desire to fix it. But this gets back to, will the ecosystem pick that up? Will we go fix that issue and then contribute it back?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about how much work it is to fix. It's just one of those things. But
it's also
probably not.
Probably out of our skill set because, maybe not all of our skill sets, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's the time to fix it. It's easier just to move to a different solution.
Yeah. I mean, that's just why driving open source adoption is just so hard. If your users run into any roadblocks along the way, that roadblock might be bigger than it would be to just switch to another project entirely when you're getting set up, because it's so easy to get stuff set up.
And sometimes there are so many options.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So, I'm the database guy, right? So if database A doesn't work, I have 30 other databases that I can try.
Yep.
Right? And I can pick which one works the best for my application, which means that I might not ever fix that bug.
And also you can just try it so quickly and validate as well. Like
especially in the cloud space.
Right.
Yeah. Just click the button, spin it up, be done with it.
Yeah. But that's also an opportunity as well, because it means that if you turn things, if you make tweaks that can really, get you in front of a lot more people very quickly, or, make things a lot more clear to people very quickly, like that can really change the course of your adoption, because, it's so easy to get started with your database or whatever that might be.
Now, here's an interesting question for you. Okay. So when we talk about that easy factor, if you're starting a company today, are you recommending that you start with the cloud service or a SaaS service?
So
that was a big sigh, by the way. That was like a big
It's a big
sigh.
question. It's a big question. Wait, so do we mean if you are building the product from scratch and you're deciding what you're going to build, or what you,
Well,
or how you...
let's say you've got an idea for, something new. And I don't know what the something new is, pick your favorite, sort of like application. Are you going to build it as a service and build that subscription model from the start? Or are you going to go more of a classic open source model with downloadable software, with, package, what are you going to do?
It's really case by case. I feel like I don't know if I could give just like a sweeping answer to what to do.
Dancing around.
Oh yeah. I mean, if it's the kind of thing where people can get really good value out of it, faster by having, say, a cloud service where they don't have to like set up a bunch of stuff locally, then like.
But do people want easy? So do they want the downloadable software experience anymore?
Some people do, but
Is it diminishing, you think?
I feel like probably, right? Like I mean, in general, convenience is going to just kind of dominate. Like, convenience in a lot of ways to me is kind of like gravity, where just you eventually are going to get enough people just based on the convenience factor over time that's a more reliable way to build critical mass towards something, versus if you make it slightly harder and just kind of like evolution, just more and more people are going to go in the direction that's more convenient to them. And over time, that convenient path will become more and more dominant. And then it's kind of a cycle of things. Well, this is kind of working for everybody.
Yes,
I'm also going to
yes.
do this thing. And so I think that if you can have a product that is, very easily installable, very easily runnable, very easily hostable, then great, and by all means do that and take the open source route. But I think there's a lot of products that are not like that, or don't have that luxury, I guess. It's a really tough question. I wish I could give a more blanket answer to that, but it depends. I don't know. Would you say differently?
No.
Yeah.
But I asked you, and so I get to not answer it.
Okay, fair.
That's what I get.
Fair enough.
So,
fair enough.
Switching gears here, we're going to switch into a little bit of a random mode now.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, I used to do another podcast, and on that podcast, I like to ask crazy things. I would just randomly ask questions and see what happened. And today at lunch, Avi told me that I asked him a question that has plagued him, absolutely plagued him for months now. It's been, 6 months?
Probably.
You just racking your brain. And the only thing I asked him was, what's your favorite food? What if we were at a conference and we were going to go out to dinner, I was going to buy you dinner, what sort of thing would it be? And he gave the answer, noodles.
Noodles are good.
Okay. But then he said, he said he regretted that ever since.
It's such a hard question, and I feel like every day I'm like, no, it's actually this. Or
Did
it's
you
actually
change your
that.
mind since lunch?
No, I haven't changed my mind since lunch.
So what is that answer now?
My answer is I still don't know.
No, you said at lunch. You said it was.
I said maybe it would be dim sum.
See, you didn't say maybe. You said it is.
Okay, if I said dim sum, super good, love it. But that's the thing. What's your favorite song? What's your favorite X? It's super hard to answer.
I told him there's only one answer to that, and it's always Freebird.
That's fair. It's fair. What's your favorite open source project?
MySQL.
Oh, wow. Really? Why?
Because that's where I started.
That's a reasonable answer.
See?
Reasonable answer.
See? I love Postgres too. It's just I started with MySQL first. Postgres is equal. My Postgres friends.
Wow.
You guys are awesome.
Wow. We're going to clip that one up.
What?
That one's
Why are you clipping that up?
That one's going on TikTok.
That one's going on TikTok?
Definitely. Follow us on TikTok.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yes. We have decided to try TikTok. Everyone, welcome to the TikTok open source channel.
Yep.
There, that's
Matt will be dancing there. We're going to clip that one too.
We're going to clip that one
Absolutely, we're going to clip that one.
I was thinking about doing the safety dance as the open source dance, like you can open source if you want to. You can leave proprietary behind.
Oh, God.
You can build from source.
We're going to be forcibly removed from the Apple Store for...
I don't think you can be forcibly removed from the Apple Store from that. Right? What is your favorite song, and what would be the open source equivalent of it? What would be your what song would you turn into an open source song? A song about open source.
I don't know, but I did ask ChatGPT to generate a poem about how great open source developers are, just for fun. And it created like a very reasonable poem that rhymed, and I was very impressed. Very impressed.
Okay.
And so maybe my favorite open source song is one that an AI has written, but maybe an open source AI. I don't know. Is there one of those yet?
Okay. So this is an interesting thing. So generating like creative works based on like AI.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, here we go. Is it like a legit thing, right? Does it open up like ethical or moral quandaries?
Oh, it definitely opens up moral quandaries.
And also, who owns it?
And we've even like discussed this before on the podcast. I think
we discussed it specifically in the GitHub Copilot.
Oh yeah, for Copilot. I mean, it's no different, right? It's a very
maybe not.
I guess where would you say the differences are between Copilot and ChatGPT in terms of this question of who owns it?
Well, okay, so ChatGPT is pulling from who knows where, and it's trying to create a brand new work, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think from a Copilot perspective, it's trying to pull reasonable code in snippets and then build them together into something that's new.
Right.
I guess you can make the argument ChatGPT kind of does that as well.
I think, yeah.
But it seems different. Like when you have like like the NFTs that are created by AI, right? Like the randomly generated stuff, where they take like 7 images and they merge them into one. It doesn't look like any one. And so it's really hard to like, point back to,
right.
Like an actual source. But I think that when you look at code generated from other code, you're going to find snippets that you're going to find in other libraries, you're going to find in other locations. You might also, like if you took your open source poem that you created and you searched just for like maybe a section of it, I wonder if you'd find it. Like, a couple phrases.
I bet you would a lot of the time.
You think so?
I think that when you're looking at like the amount of data that they probably train those models on, there's probably like not a lot, I think most things that people say have been said before a lot of the time would be my guess.
Probably. I wonder if it's word for word if they change the word so it's not plagiarism. So is it plagiarism if they like start taking, like paragraphs it kind of is.
Yeah. And ultimately this is the problem with things like OpenAI not being open source is that we don't know. And we're not going to know. And that's why it's very important that I think the kinds of tools that, are being built in the AI space right now, which is, just improving at a really, really impressive pace, those things need to be open source so we can do this kind of inspection on them and actually understand like what is really happening under the hood. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be critical. You're right.
Yeah.
So one cool thing we did this week, I don't know if you knew this, world, we actually found a fortune cookie factory.
Yeah.
Yes.
In Oakland.
And so what we're going to do now is we're going to grab a couple of fortune cookies and we're going to read our fortunes live. Oh, wow. We're going to see what is in the cards. These are from the it's the Oakland Fortune Factory. So we've got flavor,
handmade in the Bay Area.
Yeah, and we actually went to the factory to pick these up. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. So let's see what kind of fortune we've got here. That's right. We have. Well, okay, you go first.
A fun party with close friends is in your future.
Huh.
Okay.
Okay, is it an open source party? Because every party that's an open source party is a fun party. I've never been to an unfun open source party.
We definitely will, because we are going to be rescheduling the meetup for Hacking Open Source Business. We did not get quite enough people to do it, which actually would have been this evening. However, we're going to reschedule it, and that's what I think this is foreseeing.
Really? And you know how my fortune goes along with that? It says, your persistence will pay off.
Oh.
There you go. So
right.
Evidently we have to schedule a party for everyone. And our persistence on it will pay off because you all will be there with us. That'd be awesome.
We're looking forward to seeing you all there.
All right. Well, until next time, like, subscribe, and follow
Smash
us.
that subscribe button, everybody, please.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
All right.